multiple felony arrests, robberies perpetrated against women, and he's only 16 years old. On April 7th, 2024, thanks to woke leniency on crime, he was still walking the streets as a free delinquent youth. Surprise, surprise, this repeat offender was caught on surveillance video pushing an elderly woman down a flight of stairs. She suffered a fractured skull and lay helplessly on the ground while he robbed her. Crime, character, and consequences.
The suspect is 16 years old, so it will be interesting how prosecutors handle this case. On top of that, police say he has a lengthy rap sheet. He's already been accused of robbing other women. Police arresting a 16-year-old for the vicious attack on a 68-year-old woman. Irene Taliamboris was heading to St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church Sunday morning in Briarwood, Queens, when a suspect dressed in black punches her, sending her flying down the stairs. The attack caught on surveillance video. The teen is accused of taking her purse that had $300 in cash, her cell phone, credit cards, and car keys, and then driving off in her car.
This horrendous act of, pushing her with force from the church's steps, that's unheard of.
There's so much to unpack here, and my condolences go out to Mrs. Taliamboris and her family. This 60-year-old grandmother suffered a fractured skull, memory loss. Allegedly, it took her a few days to recognize her family members, and she suffered other additional injuries, not to mention the emotional damage and PTSD that she is likely to suffer from. Her family is rightly outraged, and per their statement, this lowlife is off our streets for now, and we are hoping the system will actually do its job this time. We're tired of seeing criminals walk free.
The suspect is now facing robbery, assault, grand larceny, and criminal possession of stolen property charges. The teen is no stranger to law enforcement. Police say he has multiple felony arrests, including robberies of women.
New Yorkers and Americans in general are morally outraged by the woke non-justice system and the flaunting of the protected criminal segment of society. No stranger to crime, Jayvaun is a repeat offender. In fact, 3 days prior to the crime covered in this episode, on April 4th, he stalked a woman who'd taken money out of an ATM, robbed her of her money, car keys, and then stole her car. He was apprehended and released back on the streets. Unfortunately, what is clear today is that the criminal justice system and Jayvaun's mother have not held him accountable. Based on what I have witnessed in this surveillance video and have gleaned from reading through his criminal record, Jayvaun exhibits cowardice, hatred, lack of empathy, lack of good morals, and anger or rage. Cowardice. The majority of his victims are women. Hatred. You cannot have love in your heart if you express violence, and in particular, violence towards the physically weaker, which would be children, women, and elderly. Jayvaun enjoys brutalizing women and elderly, per his criminal record. After Jayvaun visits violence on this unsuspecting elderly woman, he assaults her property and body by rifling through her coat and her purse. He then leaves her on the ground, vulnerable and unconscious, in other words, helpless. Anything could have happened to her while he had left her unattended. This is lack of empathy. Anger, rage. He does not care that he might have killed her. Such an act cannot be done without an intense feeling of anger or rage, perhaps at the world or his parents. Speaking of parents, check out the delusion and lack of strong moral character exhibited by his mother. The mother says she did not even know about his string of arrests. She says that he's a good kid, he does everything he's supposed to do. Really? Let's talk about the consequences of when character flaws are allowed to flourish. Once the George Floyd incidents and the explosion of BLM propaganda streamed 24/7 via social media and mainstream media, we knew that there was a creation of a massive shift internationally. This switch, the emotional activation, was flipped on a set of people already existing within a controlled trance. The replaying on every news outlet of the repetitive visuals of a knee on the neck was geared to reprogram and re-traumatize an already traumatized group of people. And to be clear, the trauma I speak of is not the trauma from the 1930s and 40s with lynchings and hardcore racism. It's the trauma perpetuated by Black culture. Indeed, we have a segment of a population that is socially engineered for self and societal destruction. Indeed, the George Floyd incident lit the powder keg and blew the lid off. Mainstream media fomented and then coddled the emotional reactions and outbursts, i.e. Summer of Love, mostly peaceful protests, burning and looting. The same media then created a protective class, the Black male highly steeped in criminality, not because these liberals actually care about Black men, but because they intended to use Black men and the Black underclass dysfunction against America. The social engineers who amplified this social unrest and who are behind the government and social media did this all in the name of protecting Black criminality against racism and white supremacy. The consequences? The Black underclass dysfunction is reframed as righteous indignation. Righteous indignation assumes that the indignant person has a right to act out in the name of justice, and that bad parenting and horrible criminal behavior is justified and excused because, well, racism and white supremacy. And the Black underclass, otherwise known as the Black rednecks, as coined by Thomas Sowell, are those who were undereducated and steeped in criminality and uninterested in joining mainstream society, have become the weapons of the left, the progressive left. And in the meantime, good American citizens, whether Black, white, Asian, or Latino, who happen to be guided by a moral compass, have been repeatedly disrespected and harmed by criminal acts of those within the Black underclass. And adding insult to injury, the criminal offenders are emboldened to terrorize the country of law-abiding citizens by little to no bail and purposeful repeated offending. In other words, the powers that be have unleashed the criminal Black underclass that is seething with trumped-up hatred, miseducation, reinforced by communist Marxist pro-Black intelligentsia and gutter mind programming via hip-hop and Black culture onto the American population. Of course, these liberal handlers have not taken into account and do not care about the mental health of those who they have used for their own purposes. Crazy begets crazy, and because Jayvaun's mother and culture tells him every day that he is oppressed, and liberal handlers have given him a false label of a protected class, Jayvaun and the rest of the Black underclass will reap what they've sown. Ever heard of the law of attraction? Whereas prior to the George Floyd incident, there was very little racism. Now we have a condition and a state in America where racism is on the rise. And why? Because social media is promoting scene after scene of Black criminality against innocent bystanders. And whereas social media and the powers that be were swinging the pendulum towards the idea that Black people are victims, the pendulum is now beginning to swing the other way, and people are plain fed up with Black criminality. And since this situation was socially engineered, the social engineers have begun to withdraw their support of Black criminality. Indeed, we see the influx of the illegal immigrants are now in Black communities taking up the resources that were generally funded towards Black communities, particularly the underclass communities, and they have begun to move those funds and programs and care and attention towards the legal aliens. Indeed, Black people, you have been played and you are being replaced. And whereas your sons, your uncles, your fathers, and some of your sisters and aunts and mothers have been given carte blanche in regards to criminality and no bail and low-level criminal reform, now the tides will turn and most, if not all, will be locked up for crimes that were previously ignored. There will be double and triple repercussions. And because you will have been replaced by the illegal immigrants, no one is coming to save you. Not Al Sharpton, not Ben Crump, and the American public will say, good riddance. Throw away the key.